I've seen a lot of posts on TikTok calling emulation and backwards compatibility the same thing, and I just want to clear something up. That is not always the case. Backwards compatibility can be emulation, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, there are four main ways that you could play an old game. And those ways are emulation, virtualization, porting, and hardware duplication. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of all four. Let's start with the easiest, hardware duplication. This is kind of smoke and mirrors when it comes to backward compatibility, because all you're actually doing is including original hardware along with new hardware. Like the Super Game Boy, the thing that let you play Game Boy games on the Super Nintendo, it was just a Game Boy. It was the entire inner workings of a Game Boy. It just routed its video through the Super Game Boy to be played on your TV using the Super Nintendo. The PlayStation 2 was backward compatible because it just had a PlayStation in it. Same thing was true for the PS3 FAT. There's really nothing compatible about this method of backwards compatibility, it's just you're getting two devices in one. Next you have porting. Porting is just rewriting a game to work with a different system. You can port games across generation, like you could get a game that is made for the PC, ported to the PlayStation, ported to the Switch, so on and so forth. The assets are usually the same, the game is usually the same, depending on whether or not the hardware has limitations. But you are rewriting the fundamental code to work on a different system. It is a different program. Next we have virtualization. Virtualization runs an old program on newer hardware by using a go-between virtual system. Usually this is a different type of firmware or OS. A good example is the Wii U. The Wii U can boot up in Wii mode. It's still using the Wii U's hardware, it's just running the old Wii firmware. And that old Wii firmware plays old games just fine. Finally, we come to emulation. Emulation is when you write new software to mimic old hardware. So like an N64 is so different from a modern computer just cannot read the same programs that an N64 can. So you have an N64 emulator, which basically is mimicking the old hardware of the N64, and then that program can read the programs that are N64 games. So in short, hardware duplication runs old software on old hardware. Ports run new software on new hardware that just look like old software. Virtualization runs old software on new hardware using old software. And emulation runs old software on new hardware using new software that mimics old hardware.